You said earlier that there's no update on deaths. Have there been any reported injuries because of the fire?
Sheriff, you want to?
No, we don't have any reported injuries, at least not to Crime Check or 911, and no reported deaths as of yet. Because of the scale of this and what it takes to do those kinds of investigations in an active fire scene, that could change. We're hoping that that's not the case. I will say for people who are trying to locate loved ones who are displaced, particularly if they're in the evacuation areas, if you are not able to contact a loved one that should have been or might have been in that location, call Crime Check, 509-456-2233, and ask to make a missing persons report. Both the city and county have law enforcement trying to look into as many of those cases as we can. But as of right now, we are not aware of any fatalities or serious injuries.
I have a couple of questions on the price gouging front. We're very early into this, but I'm not sure if this is a question for you, Mayor, but what are we doing to ensure that price gouging isn't taking place in case maybe someone is trying to get a hotel this evening? And then on the small business side, there's a lot of small businesses that are closed because of the level 3 evacuations. Is there federal assistance that can be provided to those people who are losing bottom line?
Well, again, I think we would encourage people both seek out official sources, not pop-up requests for assistance. When it comes to housing resources, there are housing resources still available at the convention center that are no cost, and I hope and I believe people are reaching out to their friends and families to provide housing assistance as well. And when it comes to small business assistance, we will be putting that through our channels at both the State Department of Commerce and the federal agencies.
And there is a federal price gouging law that was based on a case where somebody in the New England area tried to overcharge for a snowblower in the middle of a snowstorm. So there is a federal law, and we will use it.
Governor?
If I can just add one, just onto your price gouging question. So, having spent 12 years as Attorney General, I know that in a situation like this, Nick Brown is a fantastic Attorney General, leads a great team, does great work. I'm very, very confident that consumer protection team is actively tracking. Anytime there's a situation remotely as large as what we're seeing here, there's a team that's activated and monitoring that closely. And we would, again, I don't want to speak for the Attorney General, but if folks, individuals, see what they think might be price gouging, I would encourage them to absolutely communicate to the AG's office, the Consumer Protection Division, to file a complaint. That certainly helped us during COVID times, for example, right, and would certainly help the AG's office today.
And Governor, just to follow up, I know you spoke with the President, Congressman, we spoke yesterday about your communications with the administration, but I'll be transparent, I was in Malden when it burned to the ground, and federal funds were withheld from this community, the community of Malden.
Yes.
How do we ensure that does not happen in this situation, and you believe that the President will deliver?
Yeah, what I would say is that in my time as governor, we had a large disaster with the flood. And I obviously am aware of sometimes the challenges of some states receiving FEMA funding. I follow the news. And so I did not view that as, hey, we're just not going to get it. Rather, and we've talked about this in a meeting earlier, we just doubled down as a state on making as compelling a case as possible. We reached out, every member of our federal delegation, for example, signed a letter of support. We did a video that had bipartisan elected officials speaking in communities all across the state impacted. We just really moved heaven and earth to make it as persuasive as humanly possible. And I will say, to make sure that it wasn't just a document. What's typically done when you make that request, it's a very lengthy document, typewritten words on a piece of paper. I felt we should do something in addition to that, which was literally doing a video so one could actually see the damage from those floods. Homes literally going down rivers, right? I'm confident you'll see something similar. You will see, we will utilize the visuals of what I've certainly seen and what you've all seen, thanks to the media, by the way, for getting that information out there, to make sure it's not just dry words on a piece of paper, right? That we'll be working just as we did before to make sure that the folks who make these decisions back in Washington, D.C. fully understand the breadth and scope of this disaster. And I will just say, I can't speak to the past. I wasn't governor then. But what I can say is I deeply appreciate the president taking time. I think I requested a conversation I'm losing track of the hours here today, but just a few hours ago. And I was on the phone with him literally a couple hours later. And I had the clear sense he understood what was going on. I had the clear sense he'd been briefed on what was going on. He was knowledgeable about the situation, and I appreciated that. So and I think the people of the state of Washington should know that. So I can't promise the future, but what I can promise is we will be making a very, very persuasive case. You'll see that same work from folks all across this community to be in conversation with the federal government, and we'll do everything we can because we know how important those resources are for individuals, for businesses, for communities. We desperately, desperately, for infrastructure, we desperately need those resources.
King 5 Seattle, I think this is a question for Dave. Can you talk about where resources are coming from? When we were driving over today, we saw an engine and a truck from Salt Lake City. We were also curious if resources from the west side of the state are coming over here.
Yep. For all of the fires in Washington state right now, we have support from more than a dozen states, from Florida to Alaska, as well as a small team from Australia. And this support comes in different forms, equipment or personnel. I'll let the incident command here speak specifically to who's on this fire, but the state does have mutual aid agreements in place prior to fire season that we negotiate throughout the United States, so that when we need an asset, we can see who has it and acquire it. When another state has an asset, when we have something they need, we help them. The challenge is this summer, the whole western United States is on fire, and these assets are being spread thin. But we have more than a dozen states, and as well as the nation of Australia, represented in Washington state right now. On this fire, I'll have to let you know afterwards which teams are here.
Okay, so there was a lot of frustration regarding evacuations yesterday with gridlock. I spoke to one person who said a normal 20-minute drive took well over 2 hours for them to make last night. What plans are in place to help kind of ease that in the future? And then there was also reports of a motorcyclist who was injured during evacuation yesterday. Is there any updates regarding his condition?
On the issue of the traffic congestion yesterday, I'll say one thing and then turn it over to the chief. Our preliminary indications is that people were very responsive to the evacuation orders and that we had a very high percentage of people. And so that is good news, and it also led to traffic congestion. In terms of how we dealt with it, I'll turn to Chief Hall.
Yeah, just to give you a level of the scope of the evacuations, in that particular area, in the level 3 evacuation area, there are over 14,000 structures. A little over 10,000 of those are either single-family or multifamily residences. The latest numbers we have from about an hour ago are that about 60,000 individuals were evacuated in that amount of time. I think that's extraordinary. And my hat's off to both the firefighters and the law enforcement who were there. But that's a lot of people trying to get out of a couple of real choke points that have been problematic for that particular area for a while now. It was not unknown to us. We were aware of it, and we did as best as we could to get people out of there in that amount of time. But we're talking about 60,000 individuals. Mayor. And I have no information on the motorcyclist. And just let me clarify, the numbers I just gave you are strictly for the city limits.
And then just to follow up on that real quick, is there an update regarding, we have the individual numbers, but is there an update on the amount of structures that were potentially threatened throughout the fires in the area?
I would leave that up to Chief Williams.
Well, then, I actually don't have the whole number of structures that were threatened between the city and Fire District 9 and Fire District 10. Those numbers will be coming out more in the future. Today, this morning, the Critical Incident Management Team 7 with Incident Commander Tom Clemmo took over, and we'll start getting a little bit more information from that team as we move forward.
Just one sec. I just want to say on the evacuation, as someone who was evacuated off 5 Mile Prairie, there's only 4 ways up and down there. One, I want to speak to some of the best of what I saw yesterday. As people were evacuating early, I did see citizens getting out, directing traffic in a way that made it orderly. I expressed my concerns about moving it along as things were getting smoky. to the mayor and others, and by the time I hit the bottom of Cedar and Ash, 2 SPD officers were directing traffic in a way that was heroic. People were moving. A lot of people were getting off the prairie very quickly once that was put in place, so my gratitude there. I also want to remind people, when you're asked to evacuate, do it. Don't wait. I'm State Senator Marcus Riccelli, by the way. I represent portions of the 5 Mile. The concern that I saw, too, though, was people panicking, people driving down the wrong side of the road before both sides were opened up, not allowing vehicles to move up. And so just remain calm. We've got now National Guard here, we got law enforcement, and they'll get people out, so follow those orders. Thank you.
We can take a couple more questions.
Yeah, Bradley from Non-Stop Local Gauges. I'm just wondering, on the basics front, have we identified where this started? Have we identified a cause? Do we have any number of injury, or are we still at where we were at yesterday? Just generic information flow.
Yeah, this fire started in Fire District 10. Chief Don Malone was the initial incident commander, traveled through the city and into Chief Matt Vincey's Fire District 9. We don't know the cause. It's still under investigation. I think we've said once there's no reported injuries that we're aware of right now. Today is only day 2, so time will tell.
Is this the worst fire that's happened in Washington state history?
I couldn't speak for Washington State. I can tell you that I believe it is probably for the city of Spokane and our partnering regional agencies.
What is the cost going to look like for recovery of a event like this?
Not sure. Right.
Yeah, let the
I can
governor
add-
take it.
I can just add to that. I mean, it's obviously an extremely important question. Obviously, we don't have anywhere near that information for all sorts of obvious reasons, right? So what I will say, though, is that there will be an accounting of that. So when we make our request for FEMA assistance, that's part of the information that we need to pull together. So the state works very closely with local elected officials, local folks, to compile all that information of damaged business, individuals, homes, et cetera. We pull all that information together and then submit it to the federal government. So we obviously don't have that information today for all sorts of obvious reasons, but there will come a time when we gather that information. That does take some time, which we appreciate people's patience, and we'll communicate that out, obviously, to the media once we have that type of information.
I have a question for this, Heather. I just am curious about the natural gas shutoff that took place yesterday. There's been questions about timeliness of that. Can you explain how that policy works internally and when the decision to shut that gas off was made?
I know we're working with the first responders, and we're taking their lead on when they think it needs to happen from a safety perspective. So as I communicated with our team, it sounded like that was just as expected with that coordination.
Mayor, we have a couple of questions from the folks on the webinar
Okay.
that Ryan Roderick can read off.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ryan.
From Jerry Kornfeld, do we have any idea as to the cause?
I think we covered that.
I think we covered that. We do not, at this point in time, that it's under investigation.
And from Christine at the New York Times, do we have anyone unaccounted for?
So just to close loop on that question about unaccounted for, I'm just going to channel the chief here, that was mentioned earlier. This report may have come on later, and the answer was there's nobody currently unaccounted for, but I think the chief mentioned that could obviously change given the scope of the challenge.
Yeah,
Sorry.
and people who are concerned about someone who they have not had contact with should report to Crime Check, and both city and county law enforcement are doing those welfare checks.
From Joe Sullivan, specifically for Governor Ferguson, you had mentioned specific items requested to FEMA. What were those specifics?
Oh, thanks for that question. My apologies if I didn't cover that. I probably written it down, and I'm going to ask the general to assist me because I'm now working off memory. And if we neglect to include everything, we'll follow up, and Veronica can follow up with a list. But I know search and rescue was a part of that request. I know that housing assistance was a part of that request. I know that assistance with literally food, right? So folks who need 3 meals a day right now was certainly a part of that request. I know that debris removal was a part of that request, and I'm going to turn to the general, hopefully maybe.
Did I nail it?
Did I nail that? So I think that's, and I forgot who asked that question, but they should feel free to reach out to Brianna just to make sure I didn't miss an item in there. But it's a fairly, this is just to emphasize, as folks who were there on the call, things move very quickly, right? And so we're reaching out to local officials. We depend on them for what they need. That may change as they get a greater sense of the scope of the tragedy. But I just really want to emphasize, for the FEMA officials, they move very, very quickly. They arranged that call. We had it just before the press conference. That's why, frankly, we were a little bit delayed, was getting that call in. So that request has been made, and they moved very quickly with the flood request for that short-term assistance. We literally had assistance within hours, and I'm optimistic it'll be a similar response. But I want to emphasize we're deeply grateful to FEMA for how quickly they respond to us.
Chief, real quickly, I just was wondering, we've heard reports of possible looting taking place in the evening hours. Any arrests made on that front, or any solace you can provide to people that are concerned about their homes?
Yes, we had the same reports. We've investigated each and every one. And once again, I want to say I'm speaking strictly for the city. The sheriff can certainly speak for the county. And we found no credibility to any of those. We're using all of the tools available to us and all of the technology available to us to protect folks' property and their homes while they're not there.
Chief, does that mean you have deputies out patrolling neighborhoods or stationed in neighborhoods? I can't remember.
We have officers. Yesterday, we had the assistance of the county and the deputies. As the fires grew in the county, obviously they had to siphon off their resources. But now we have over, General, I believe it's over 100 National Guardsmen who are assisting us in safeguarding the property in those neighborhoods.
Sure.
I'm County Commissioner Josh Kearns. One of the other things I wanted to touch on in regards to not only the potential for looting, but is during the recovery process, the victims of these fires are going to be approached by a lot of people that are going to try to sell them things. We noticed during the Grayson, Oregon road fire a couple of years ago, many times those are not the best actors. Sometimes those individuals do not deliver on those promises. So I just really want to encourage folks who have been victims of these fires, do your research. If you are hiring someone, if you are exchanging money for a service, make sure you do the research on those individuals to just make sure that you are working with positive actors who are actually going to deliver on what it is that they are offering you. And then also a part of the recovery, we do have the benefit of having a Spokane Regional Long-Term Recovery Group that was stood up as a part of the Gray and Oregon Road Fire, and they will play a huge part in this recovery as well, and they will be much more forward-facing when we get to that stage. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I wanted to, do we have time? One more question, and then I have a story to close.
I just wanted to see if there was any homes that were still at risk and if the fire is still continuing to grow past its current boundaries.
Either.
Yes, there are. This fire is still very active, and it's going to be for some time until we can get crews to visit every place that was affected by it. As far as its outside boundaries, I would not say that it's contained. But we have what we feel like is relatively decent control, but it can change at any time. I mean, today's weather was a concern with a different wind direction. So this is very dynamic, and it will be for a little bit more time.
I just want to close with a story. I was at the convention center this morning at the evacuation center, and thanks to Red Cross and the volunteers, it was calm and organized, and people were being cared for. And someone recognized me and called me over, and it was a woman and her son, and the son had evacuated when the order came out, and his mother had refused, and someone knocked on her door, and I don't know if this was city or county sheriff, because they were both out there doing that, and they convinced her to leave, and they helped her evacuate with her 4 cats, and she's in a safe place right now because of our first responders and because of our community's assistance to her. And we just have to keep that moving forward regardless of what the fires bring us. So thank you, everybody, for being here.
Thanks, Mayor.